Alrighty, y'all. What's up? My name is Spencer Dunlap. I am the founder of the Bodysurf Collective, and I just wanted to create this video, screen recording of myself sharing a PowerPoint presentation that I will be presenting next week at a Learn to Bodysurf retreat in Costa Rica. And I wanted to share this just because I think a lot of the information is relevant. I've written a lot about this on my blog, shared a lot of information on the Instagram and YouTube channels. I'll put links to all that in the description of this video. But I wanted to try this screen recording and do a PowerPoint presentation just so you can follow along and see what we're going to be talking about, all the relevant information that we're going to be introducing next week during our Learn to Body Surf retreat. So we'll talk a little bit about the history of body surfing, which is research I've been doing over the last couple of years. And then we'll talk about more like the culture and why I believe body surfing is an important prerequisite skill to have for anyone who's going to be spending a lot of time in the ocean. So we'll jump in here, and I'm just going to move myself up. There we go. So the first slide here, when I do this presentation in person, I'm going to read a blog post I wrote a couple of years back called The Day I Fell in Love with Body Surfing. I'm not going to read that now, just in the interest of time, but I will put a link to that blog post in the description so you can read that and see kind of my experience with body surfing, how I fell in love with it, and how that led me to today. But I will read this quote here at the bottom by Joseph Campbell. Campbell writes, quote, "If you follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while, waiting for you. And the life that you ought to be living is the one you are living. Wherever you are, if you are following your bliss, you are enjoying that refreshment, that life within you all the time." So on the day that I fell in love with body surfing, there was a moment out in the lineup where I was floating on my back and I thought of this quote. And I realized that I was in a moment of bliss, and that according to the quote, which has influenced me a lot, is that I should figure out a way to continue following that bliss. So figure out a way to continue to body surf as much as possible and share that stoke that I have for body surfing with other people. And that has led to this video. It's led to the blog and the retreat that I'll be running next week. So I just wanted to start with that. And now we'll jump into the history of body surfing. So body surfing is an ancient global pastime that predates both board surfing and written history. Many indigenous peoples developed and practiced recreational body surfing independently of each other for millennia. And you may read that or hear that and say, well, how do you know that? And the reason we know that is through oral history. So written history is not the only way to pass down this practice or this history of body surfing. A lot of cultures, such as in Polynesia, for example, who had oral histories, they have body surfing in their mythology, but that mythology was transferred down through generations via word of mouth. So it's hard when you're writing history, when you're researching history, you kind of got to go into written and factual evidence. It's hard to base that history off mythology, but we know, and I think we can intuit or assume that the first people to ride waves were probably body surfers. Even if it wasn't body surfers, it could have been canoe surfers, fishermen, right? Or people who were traveling to islands such as the Polynesians that have reef breaks, that have waves. And it's highly likely that these people would have crashed their canoes upon entering that surf zone and had to have strong swimming skills or body surfing skills in order to survive and make it to the beach. So that's where that assumption comes from. But it wasn't just practical. Also, people practiced body surfing for the fun of it, for recreation as well. Based on historical records, so written evidence, these original body surfing peoples were prevalent throughout Polynesia, West Africa, Mediterranean, and Black Seas, India, Japan, Southeast Asia, Australia, and even dynastic China. where body surfers rode an annual tidal bore at the mouth of the Qiantang River over 1,000 years ago. So I've written a bit about this. There's a couple of books about this that mention this, that the first written recording actually of body surfers comes from dynastic China about 1,000 years ago. There's this wave that you can still surf to this day. It's a standing river wave, Qiantang River. So what happens is the river is flowing out to sea, and then certain times a year there's this extreme tidal push where the tide is pushing up the river mouth, and that creates a standing wave. And there was a tradition that was practiced for hundreds of years of there was this festival where these body surfers would go and they would swim out to the wave and then ride the wave up the river mouth. And we have written evidence of this. So the first body surfers, well, the first evidence of body surfers comes from China in the river, but there's plenty of other examples of Europeans as well observing other cultures body surfing in the ocean. Polynesia is an obvious example of that, Tahiti, Hawaii, also West Africa. There's a lot of written recordings coming from as early as like the 1600s, but more specifically about body surfing in like the 1800s coming out of Africa. Although body surfing was practiced throughout the world, it was in Hawaii that the sport developed to the highest degree. Board surfing, or he'e-nalu, was practiced primarily by Hawaiian elites, while body surfing, or kaha-nalu, which translates to wave gliding, was the sport of the people. So yeah, body surfing was the most common sport throughout Polynesia, specifically in Hawaii, where it developed to the highest extent. And what doesn't get written up about a whole lot is that board surfing was actually reserved for elite status people. So you can think like kings and queens and royalty, princes, princesses, and kind of the highest rung of society, whereas most of the other Hawaiians and Polynesians would have been riding on their bellies, whether with a small belly board or body surfing, as we can see in this image here of this goddess. I think that's her name is Hayaka. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. She's body surfing while these other guys are surfing. And this story actually comes from Hawaiian mythology. Polynesians passed down the skill of body surfing through generations, perhaps beginning over 4,000 years ago. So we mentioned that the story of Chinese body surfers came from roughly 1,000 years ago, but we believe that for many millennia, Polynesians have been body surfing when their ancestors migrated from Southeast Asia to the remote islands of the Pacific. By the time the Polynesians arrived in Hawaii around 400 AD, wave riding was common practice among the islanders. In 1870, Hawaiian historian John Papai'i commented on body surfing's popularity among his fellow islanders, saying, quote, "Body surfing was sport available to every Hawaiian regardless of wealth or social standing. It is still the most popular form of wave riding around the world." And then this photo here, I believe, comes from Samoa, early 1900s. And you can see that the majority of the people, also, although some of them do have boards, mostly belly boards it looks like, some of them are also, many of them are body surfing and are out playing around in the waves and just riding them with no equipment. Prior to the invention of swim fins in the 1940s, and just a note on that, swim fins really didn't become popular or widespread until the 1950s, post-World War II. In World War II was when the first rubber swim fins were patented and used by the US Navy. But after the war was when swim fins became available to the public, and that's when body surfers started to use them. So back to our text here, body surfing would have been fairly rudimentary, riding a broken wave straight to shore in a simple prone position. That said, certain exemplary pre-fin body surfers such as Duke Kahanamoku, pictured above, were unhindered by the lack of equipment. So Duke is known as being a very skilled body surfer, and he was actually responsible for sharing and spreading body surfing to different parts of the world, the US East Coast and also Australia. And so, yeah, the majority of body surfers, indigenous body surfers who were practicing the sport for thousands of years, would have probably been in the whitewater. catching the waves as they curled over, or maybe even catching the whitewater and then riding straight to shore. And then once body surfers started to use swim fins, they were able to swim all the way out, catch the waves as they're breaking, and ride across the face of those waves. That being said, modern body surfer Dave Rostovich is living proof that swim fins are not essential to elite level body surfing. Perhaps some of the first body surfers were able to ride waves like dolphins and seals. So you can see in that photo, Rostovich is getting barreled, and you can see his foot is exposed there. He's not using swim fins. So it is possible without swim fins to catch a barreling wave, stay in that barrel, ride it out. I've seen footage of Rostovich going underwater like a dolphin and then popping back out in the wave, all without using swim fins. Okay, so going back to what I mentioned about Duke spreading body surfing throughout the rest of the world, in the early 1900s, we see a lot of Pacific Islanders sharing their body surfing techniques and skill, which was the most developed, and bringing that to other parts of the world. So Duke Hanamaku brought it to the U.S. East Coast and also Australia, and also probably California. But before him, George Freeth, who's also Hawaiian, who's half Hawaiian, half Haole. I think one of his parents was Irish, the other was Hawaiian. George Freeth brought it to California, skills where he actually taught a lot of lifeguards in California how to body surf in the early 1900s. And then Tommy Patana, who was a Polynesian, brought his skill set to Australia. Started, although indigenous people were likely body surfing in Australia long before Tana got there, Tana was the one who introduced it to a lot of the European population who had moved and colonized Australia. And that all happened in the early 1900s. And then if we look at these photos here, these are pretty cool, both from Australia. One is from the Sydney Mail, early 1900s. You can see some body surfers riding waves in a prone position there. And then the one on the right was that was an advertisement for World War One, trying to recruit Australian men to go fight in the war. And they've got a photo or a drawing of a body surfer there. So, written in the 1930s by California waterman Ron Canoe Drummond, The Art of Wave Riding was the first ever body surfing how-to manual. This rare book had an initial print run of just 500 copies. So a couple years back, I was actually able to access this book, which is really hard to find. I went to the University of California, Los Angeles Special Collections Library and was able to read the book page to page. And this is really where my methodology for teaching body surfing came from. I have to give credit to Ron Drummond, who wrote this book almost 100 years ago now. And you can see in that photo on the right that he is body surfing a whitewater wave without swim fins. He's got his back foot up out of the water, similar to what we saw Rostovich doing earlier. And he was the first one who really was able to come up with a step-by-step teaching methodology that was written down with photos so that other people could learn how to body surf without swim fins in the whitewater. And then body surfers adopted swim fins in the 1940s and 50s, utilizing the added propulsion to catch breaking waves and ride horizontally across the face. So around this time when body surfers started using swim fins after World War II, when they became popular and widely available, that's when body surfing really took off because the fins allowed you to catch waves and ride them in a way that you couldn't really do before, unless you were highly skilled. During this era, body surfing experienced a great boom and was featured in surfing contests, surf films, books, and major publications such as Life, which is pictured above, Esquire, Sports Illustrated, National Geographic, and Surfer. And we have a quote from Robert Boots Matthews, quote, "In the 1950s, if you knew how to surf, you knew how to body surf," end quote. And this is a cool photo from Life magazine. The title is "Surf Riding on California Beach is a Favorite Summertime Sport." And you can see a bunch of body surfers. I believe this is pre-swim fin, swimming for a wave, most likely next to the Santa Monica Pier, California. Between 1954 and 1958, native Hawaiian Buffalo Keolana won the body surfing contest at the Makaha International Surfing Championships, which at that time was the premier surfing championships throughout the world. He won that contest 4 times, the body surfing competition. Competing at his home break against the world's best surfers, Buffalo made his ancestors proud by winning at a sport they had developed for centuries. So Buffalo's a really cool guy. I had a chance to meet him a couple years back. He is a skilled waterman. He was a lifeguard at Makaha for many years. Canoe surfer, longboard surfer, body surfer, boogie boarder, pipo, like any way you can ride a wave, he is an expert at it. So just cool to see a Hawaiian um, at Makaha on Oahu, his home break, winning those body surfing championships. And then let's talk about some women. So in the early 1960s, Candy Calhoun became the first woman to body surf both the Newport Wedge and the Bonsai Pipeline. So just note here, probably Hawaiian women body surfed the Bonsai Pipeline long before Candy, but she was the first one to do it at the Wedge and at Pipeline, which are two of the best and most dangerous body surfing waves in the world. Candy was like a seal. Sorry, this is a quote from Mike Doyle. Quote, Candy was like a seal. She liked being in the water more than on land. She rode surfboards, but she liked to be more in touch with the water. That's why she rode her pipo board or body surf. Less gravity, more sensual and intimate, end quote. And in the photo here, you can see Candy's at the wedge. You can tell by the rock pylons, or those big rocks behind her. Excuse me, and she has a pair of swim fins in her hand, and she's about to go out for a body surf. That's 1961. Moving on, in 1970, How to Body Surf became the second book to focus on body surfing technique, nearly 40 years after The Art of Wave Riding. So this is a cool book. I also was able to take a look at this at a special collections library. I forget if it was UCLA or SDSU, San Diego State. But this one's fun because it's more, it's got cartoons, so the illustrations are really good, and it does actually have some good advice if you're a beginner body surfer or intermediate body surfer and you're looking for some tips. This is another great book. And then body surfing's widespread popularity began to falter in the 1970s. So we have this big boom in the 50s and 60s, and then it begins to falter in the 1970s. Once the ankle leash, or the surf leash, was invented, surfers no longer needed to body surf after lost surfboards post-wipeout. And then in the 1980s, the nail in the coffin, the rampant commercialization of board surfing further relegated body surfing to the cultural underground. So we can see here Russell Hughes, who's a professional surfer. He's in a competition in 1968, pre-surf leash, before the invention of the surf leash. He wipes out during the competition, and then he body surfs in to go grab his board so he can get back out in the lineup and can continue competing. So this is what most body surfers, all surfers would have done prior to the 1970s, because they didn't have surf leashes, and the most efficient way when you wipe out, and they would have been wiping out a lot, is to go and swim in or body surf in and go grab your board. So after the 1970s, we see that skill set start to be lost, and many surfers to this day who learn how to surf, they don't learn how to body surf first. And really, my argument is that body surfing should be a prerequisite. All surfers should know how to body surf. Thankfully, in more recent times, body surfing has made a strong comeback. In 2011, professional surfer Keith Malloy produced a feature-length documentary titled Come Hell or High Water, which highlighted body surfing as a joy-inducing, minimalist alternative to board surfing. So yeah, if it weren't for this film, I may have never thought that I could do something like this. I'm also creating my own film about body surfing, running a retreat. I have, social media about body surfing. I have a blog, all these things. I don't think I would have chose to do that if there weren't this interest in body surfing, that's this research and interest that's really come after that film in more recent decades. And then that body surfer there is one of my favorites. She's a professional longboarder, Belinda Baggs from Australia. She's also an amazing body surfer, really cool person too. And then after this film, there was a book, or around the same time, a book called The Plight of the Torpedo People that came out with a bunch of frame grabs from the film. So this is a more recent book about body surfing, and it's mostly visual, but there is some text as well. And I'll just read one of the quotes from the book from photographer Chris Burkhardt. And he says, quote, "Rarely have I had the opportunity to photograph something as pure as body surfing, the most stripped down form of wave riding, no logos to capture and no money to be made. To the outside world, body surfing might be seen as eccentric behavior, but as a photographer, I was grounded by the experience of creating these images. It reminded me of what's important in life and why I love to be in the ocean." Love this book, love that quote. And then here we have Obama body surfing. And the same body surf stoke that lives within us lives within the 44th president of the United States, the most famous body surfer in the world. Many of you will probably know that Obama's from Hawaii. He grew up in Hawaii, went to Punahou High School, I believe. And yeah, he's a good body surfer. He knows what he's doing. And so he is probably the most famous body surfer in the world. And this is a really cool um, piece of art drawn by Ken Chirone. I think is the artist's name. In 2022, the New York Times featured an article about Brazilian big wave body surfer Kalani Latanzi. Latanzi's incredible big wave body surfing was also featured in a 2020 documentary film called Kalani Gift from Heaven. A pretty big deal. We go from body surfing post 1970s, kind of losing cultural interest and kind of going underground, and then recently, as evidenced by this article in the New York Times, um, there's definitely been a revival. So Kalani is an amazing big wave body surfer. I have a video here. Let's hope we can watch it here on the presentation. Yeah, pretty cool there. So that is Kalani, the guy from that article, getting barreled at Jaws. It's like the biggest wave that anybody's ever body surfed and made it out of. He is using a hand ski on that, so this board for his hands. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to generate enough speed to actually make that wave. But pretty amazing to see how far body surfing has come, especially in recent decades. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can go to the next slide. There we go. So this photo is of Justine Dupont, and she is a big wave surfer, famous for some of her waves at Nazare, surfing some of the biggest waves in the world. She's also had some crazy waves at Chopu. And one of her favorite training practices for big wave surfing and getting comfortable in the ocean and working on her breath holding and just like cross training swimming is body surfing. And her husband, his name is Fred David, he's French, and he is a world championship body surfer as well, very famous body surfer from France, and he's also a lifeguard and part of her big wave surfing team. So he actually tows her into a lot of these big waves. So really cool photo. A lot of big wave surfers in their off time in order to train for ocean survival and just feeling more confident in the ocean, they practice body surfing. I'll just read this quote from the Surf Survival Handbook. Quote, "In the pre-leash era, surfers were strong swimmers by virtue of the fact that swimming after one's board was a routine occurrence. But there is little doubt that most of today's surfers lack the swimming prowess of their predecessors. However, strong swimming skills should be an absolute requirement for participation in the sport because inevitably your leash will break, you'll lose your board, and you'll need to rely solely on your swimming abilities to make it back to shore." So that's a large main reason, really, why I decided to start teaching body surfing. I was a surf instructor previously, and then I thought to myself, why am I teaching all these people how to surf, but not teaching them how to body surf? Eventually, they're going to go out, they're going to break their leash, they'll probably be in big waves, bigger waves, when their leash breaks, and then they're going to have to swim into the beach. And if I don't make sure they're a good swimmer, I don't teach them how to body surf, then that is a problem. So it's kind of my belief that all surf instructors who are teaching newcomers how to surf should start with body surfing first. Here's another quote that I love from David Lane. Body surfing is a process which doesn't necessitate a goal. It is rather a method for being attuned to the present moment and foregoing the technological madness that has overtaken our civilization, where staring at computer screens for hours on end has become the norm. So that's this idea that body surfing is meditation, which I really believe it is. When you're out in the ocean without equipment, without a board, it's just you and your swim fins. It's quite a different experience. Also, being in the water, fully submerged, being able to observe all the things around you, feel the currents, um, and not be on stage, not have other people paying attention to you, like what happens in board surfing, where you're highly visible because you're standing on a board. Body surfing just allows you to, it's just you in the ocean, kind of blend in. Another quote here from Chris Kalima, who's a body surfer I really love. He's featured in that film we talked about earlier, Come Hell or High Water. He says, quote, body surfing is about flow, immersing yourself in the ocean's energy. It's individual, it's dynamic. There's communion with nature that I really enjoy. I love body surfing in the ocean, but really at the root of it, it's about being out in the natural world and tapping into her energy. So yes, nature therapy is huge, especially in today's society where we're spending too much time indoors, not enough time exercising, too much time on social media and in front of screens. Body surfing just allows you to reconnect with the natural world. This is Mark Cunningham, one of the best body surfers of all time, one of the most iconic and well-known body surfers of all time, also a longtime lifeguard on Hawaii's North Shore. He says, quote, as a teenager, I remember very clearly sitting on the beach thinking, this is as clean and beautiful and real and meaningful to me as anything in the world. And if it's giving me pleasure and making me happy, why shouldn't I continue to do this as long as I can? Quote. Love that. Beautiful. I felt very much the same way when I fell in love with body surfing. I said, hey, this makes me happy. Why not continue to do it? And then Hannah Walsh, who is going to be co-leading the retreat with me next week. She's a talented body surfer, former lifeguard, and filmmaker. Here's her quote, I can easily say that body surfing has changed my life. There is nothing like the feeling of riding a wave's energy that has traveled thousands of miles to never again repeat itself. As I cruise down the line, all thoughts and stressors wash away, peace is found, and happiness begins to spread. Once you know this feeling, you'll never forget it. I love that quote. And then that's me. I'll play this video if we have time. I think it's pretty quick. I'll just read this quote really quickly. When sliding waves sin tabla, without a board, my ego fades away as my attention is redirected outward to my immediate surroundings, feeling the wave energy as I dive beneath it, the current pulling me as I float and tread, and when I ride a wave, I strive to be one with it, conforming my body to its ever-changing shape. Body surfing, at its core, is an act of equilibrium, achieving a balanced state through the equal action of opposing forces. I'd add to that it's also equilibrium of the mind and body getting in tune there. So let's play this video here. And that's it, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this presentation about both the history of body surfing and why more people should be body surfing. And yeah, I'll put any links from the video that are relevant in the video description. Hope y'all enjoyed and have a good one. Ciao.